Oh, hey there. What's that? You don't have any idea why you're here? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Cue that narration montage. On a dark morning in January 2019, one artist dared to voice a disturbing thought. What if, Google became my brain or whatever? Seriously? That's this guy's origin story? Oh, fine. Whatever. Let's roll with it.
Alphabet, animal, artist, activation!
What on earth was... While your brain is still recovering from what just happened, why not click that little like button, and if you haven't already, hit subscribe and smash that notification bell, and let's go on an art adventure. Today I am up to the letter M. Once again, Google's thrown me a curveball and given me a penguin for the letter M. This time though, it's the macaroni penguin. Cute little guys with the little yellowy orange stuff on their head. I think they're super cute penguins, and if you ever watch videos of them, there's some great ones on YouTube if you search for them, you'll see that they live a pretty crazy life. Diving in and out of really rough surf while seals are trying to rip their heads off. Poor little guys. And I've decided once again to draw a little penguin family, or an animal family. The feet on this one, as you saw, really threw me a curveball for a while. I guess I was trying to make them look realistic or something, even though the rest of the style is cartoony, and I didn't thumbnail or plan out what I was doing. Originally, I think I wanted to do a quick drawing with just one penguin, and it all changes. I end up throwing in a family of penguins and putting in a background and figuring out how the circle is going to fit into it all as I go along. Never a good idea. This is why people should thumbnail stuff as they're working, before they start working on their final piece. But you know, I'm having fun with this stuff and just trying to do the best that I can in the time that I have. So I've outlined everything with a pencil, and then for this piece I'm mostly using Touch 5 alcohol markers once again. I'm mostly using these alcohol markers because I haven't used them a whole lot before this project, and I would say maybe a quarter to a half of them are already running out of ink, or drying up I should say. And you can kind of fix them by putting more rubbing alcohol back in, or the Copic colorless blender, adding that into it, but it's a bit of a pain in the neck to do it, and it still doesn't really work that well, so I don't particularly recommend that approach. So I'm just doing my best to get some use out of them while some of them at least are still working. And they're okay. Like I said last episode, I wouldn't recommend buying them, mainly because of that issue where they seem to dry up. And it's not just me, other YouTubers have had other problems with it, and other people online that I've researched have had problems with those markers. They also bleed out a lot on the paper, not just through the paper. All alcohol markers pretty much do that, but they bleed outwards. And so let's say you've done really careful line work and then you lay down the Touch 5 marker along it, it's going to bleed out well beyond that line work, and then you're going to have to redo the lines, or in some cases you can't because the lines were too fine and they were all crossing over each other. Or you're going to have to use like a white gel pen or something to fix the areas where it's bled out. It's a bit of a pain, and you certainly can't work small with them either. These are pretty, not super huge drawings, but maybe half the size of normal copy paper, those circle parts, so something like this size, and that's about the minimum size that you'd want to work on with Touch 5 markers. But if you have something like Copic markers, you can get really fine details. And that little top part that I was just doing, I switched to my Copic markers for that. and the ink will stay where you put it, and there was no way that would happen if I had have used the touch fire markers for that part. So the background ends up being the icy Antarctic with the aurora australis, or the southern lights in the sky, and a little bit of the ocean showing on the ice shelf, and then just this mother penguin and a couple of her little penguin bubs, although I think most penguins only have one baby at a time, but whatever. This one has two, and they're just chilling out on the ice shelf, maybe waiting for the daddy to come home and bring them some fish to eat, or vice versa. Maybe it's dad with the kids. I hadn't really figured out a backstory, but I'm pretty pleased with how this piece came together, kind of just a cute little cartoon style. And I finish it off with my Wink of Stella brush. You can see it going down there, which adds some glitter. But because it's quite watery, it made the paper really, really wrinkly. And I end up wishing I had have just used my silver metallic marker, the Amsterdam acrylic marker in silver. It would have looked maybe even better, and it wouldn't have wrinkled the paper as much. And then I just finished some details with the white jelly roll, mainly because the touch 5 markers keep bleeding outwards. But I like the white effect breaking up the dark areas, and especially because the sky's so dark and almost the same color as the dark areas on the penguin, the white really helps to help the penguins to pop out, I think. And so that's M for macaroni penguins. And moving on to the next letter for today, the letter N, I received a narbalek. And I didn't even know that they're called narbaleks when I was growing up. It's the indigenous word for a little rock wallaby. So it's another Aussie animal. And if you don't know what wallabies are, they're basically little versions of kangaroos and super cute. And they come in a variety of sizes, but narbaleks, or the little rock wallabies, are some of the smallest ones. And they'll bounce and hop along rocks around the Northern Territory. I haven't seen them because I'm not from that area. I think I've seen them in zoos and things, but not in the wild. And they're just cute little kind of crosses between bunny rabbits and kangaroos. And so here I've put one narbalek up close, and I think I was just playing this one on the fly as well. Yeah, I didn't plan this one out either. And then I decided to do a whole narbalek, so you can see its whole body there. And then there was still a bit of empty space, so I was left having to think about what to do. And I decided then to take inspiration from Indigenous Aboriginal art and to do some Indigenous motifs in the background and to try to color it with a combination of the metallic Amsterdam acrylic markers in metallics and Indigenous sort of colors, so reds and yellow ochres and those sorts of colors. And I really quite like how this one turned out as well. I think it matches the kind of style of the previous one and a number of my other drawings of this kind of mix between cartoony and semi-realistic. And I think that's just my default style for drawing fairly quickly and creating a finished piece in traditional markers fairly quickly. So I think they're taking something like 20 minutes for the pencils, and then another like up to 30 to 40 minutes for the coloring. It depends on what sort of materials that I'm using with these, but roughly it's about that length of time. And usually when I'm messing around with the camera and all those other things, I end up taking an hour in total. So I'm showing a part of this drawing in real time so that you can see I guess the approach that I'm taking at the moment. I'm finally getting to a stage where I've learnt that technique of doing basic outline shapes, in this case starting with kind of 4 ovals, 1 for the head, 2 for the ears, 1 for the body, and then building up body parts from there and refining the starting shapes, those starting ovals as I go. And it really does make a difference once you learn that basic sort of technique or approach of breaking down complex shapes into simpler shapes. you can really start to develop your own style and speed up quite a bit. I always thought if I wanted to get good at art, I would have to just be able to completely memorize a shape or an object and be able to draw it perfectly from the start to finish without, I don't know, any erasing or modification or anything like that. But it's a really silly way to think. And if you watch any great artist, they almost all start with basic shapes and then they build and refine on those basic shapes. So now you can start to see the indigenous motifs going on in the background. The one that I'm working on at the moment, I believe, is actually a kangaroo, not a rock wallaby, but I figured close enough, I'll just use that motif, and they're closely related animals to each other, and it just fits in well, or I think it fits in well. And then some rocks from, I think maybe the Kimberley area. It looks a little bit like Uluru, or Ayers Rock, but I don't think it actually is from my reference that I used. And then a common motif in Indigenous Australian art is often to have circles and dots. And so I used the Copic markers and a bit of white for that as well. Oh, I also totally forgot that for the first time I break out my new technical pens with this piece as well. So you can see a little bit of me trying to figure out how to use them and to get the ink into them and to put it all together. And I kind of think it's a whole bunch of work for not really that awesome of a result. There are some pros to using them. The ink that you get with them is completely waterproof, properly waterproof. So you can use them with watercolors and a whole bunch of other media. They're alcohol pen proof as well. Wherever you put that ink, it's going to stay. And the line is always going to be perfectly, absolutely uniform. Because if you haven't used a technical pen before, the tip of it is a long cylinder, basically a needle point, and the ink comes down that needle point, and you have to pretty much hold the pen vertically. So that's why you can't really see what I'm doing as well. You can't hold it on an angle. It's like a syringe, it's like a needle, and the ink is just going to come out consistent and uniform and always the exact same thickness. But I realize actually that's not really the style that I like so much anymore. I might find a use for them and I might continue to play with them, but nowadays I really like varying outlines and brush pens that create different lined thickness and width and create some real interest to the piece just from the line work alone. And so I end up going back over most of this, or at least some of the bigger outlines as well, and fixing things up. Something else I think I discover on this piece, it took me a while, but I think I get to it, is that I realized I could water down the Amsterdam acrylic metallic markers and not just have them at full concentration to lay down a flat area solidly. And so I start to mix in, as you can see there with the ceramic palette, a little bit of water, and that allows me to do basically watercolor washes in metallics with these acrylic markers. And on the Narbalek on the right, you can then see a real difference in the kind of area on its chin and its front torso and tummy versus the side areas where it's real solid. And I use a sort of similar approach on the Narbalek that I'm working on now, but I also add in some of my Tombow Jewel markers and some other things to add in some sort of pinks and reds and hopefully to create some interest beyond just flat metallic that way. I wish I had have left more of it subtle, or like with the Narbalek on the right, some areas that are very pale to give more of a contrast on that second Narbalek, but I think it turns out okay. And then for the indigenous areas, I use a combination of the Tombow Jewel markers and my Touch 5 markers. I think it was going really well with the Touch 5 markers until I get to the bottom half, and the pen that I really wanted to use, or the marker that I really wanted to use, is really quite dried up, and I try to reactivate it, but I just don't quite get an even coverage that next time that I go to use it. And I guess I could have persisted with it, but I was just getting frustrated, to be honest. And so that last area there is really quite uneven. But apart from that, I'm pretty happy with this piece, and I think both M and N end up being pretty cute little animals for those days. And so I think I'm finally about halfway through this alphabet series now, or over halfway. It's taking me a bit longer than I expected it to, but I'm still trucking along, and I even have some collabs coming up for some of the remaining letters, so I'm excited about that. Some of the last letters of the alphabet, I'll be creating animals with some other YouTubers, so stay tuned for those. And so thank you so much for watching today. Don't forget, click that like and that notification bell and hit subscribe if you are not a subscriber already. And leave me a comment down below for L, M, N, O, and P. What are your guesses for the animals for the letters O and P? And that's it for today. Take care, everyone. Bye.